Welcome to 10th or Tuesday, episode 10. My name is Michael Boldin, joined by my cohort,
Michael Maharrey.
All right, so Mike, I've been watching kind of the upward trend in prices of gold and Bitcoin recently, and that I've seen some commentary talking about concern about the value of the dollar, which I guess we should always be concerned about the value of the dollar and how the Fed has actually been ruining it for so long. But that brings me to some of the bills that I wanted to cover in this week's episode. Most prominently, Arizona House Bill 2014, which passed the Arizona House yesterday and is moving on to the state Senate. Can you give us a little overview of what's going on?
Right, definitely. So what this bill does is it will remove the capital gains tax on gold and silver and basically create more of an opportunity to use it in normal everyday transactions. So basically what that means, if today you buy some gold and say you pay, I don't know what the price is,
$1,200 or so.
$1,200 or so, yeah. And then in a couple of years you do a transaction and you get $1,400 of fiat currency back. The state is going to tax you, excuse me, on $200 of quote unquote capital gain, which basically it's taxing inflation is what it's doing. And I just was reading the other day that the inflation is actually starting to pick up quite a bit, which might be why you've seen the price of gold go up. So this bill would eliminate that capital gains tax, which is a penalty for utilizing gold and silver, buying and selling gold and silver. So this would essentially just create a foundation to open the door to allow people to purchase gold and to use gold in barter transactions without having to worry about paying capital gains tax. So this is kind of a second step. The first step being removing sales taxes from the sales of gold and silver, which I believe there's a couple of bills that are pending on that as well.
So I guess that kind of ties into the old maxim, Mike, of the power to tax is the power to destroy. If you're going to tax something, you're going to discourage its use, especially with gold. It's going to be less likely that people will use it as currency if they're thinking, okay, all I have to do is swap this out a couple of times, whether it's a sales tax transaction or there in Arizona, capital gains. If it increases in value, they're going to take some of that money. I mean, obviously, the reverse doesn't happen. If it loses value, the state isn't covering some of that loss. So it's absurd that it would be the other way around. But you also mentioned the idea of removing sales tax, and there is a pair of companion bills in Tennessee. I believe they're addressing the sales tax issue there, right?
I think so, and also in Kentucky. And there are only a few states right now that actually charge sales tax on the sale of gold and silver. And so Tennessee and Kentucky are two of those and are both looking at the possibility of removing those. And that's even more absurd than the capital gains taxes. It would be like me going to the bank and, getting 4 quarters for $1 and then being charged 7% sales tax on buying quarters, which basically is what the sales tax on gold and silver is. So
they like getting their grubby hands on a little of everything. Well, I think they like the idea that, and Doug Ducey in Arizona and his predecessor, Jan Brewer, have both vetoed 3-4 years in a row anything to advance gold and silver as currency or use there. And I think these establishment types really dislike the idea of people being able to use something else other than Federal Reserve notes as money.
Exactly. It's a monopoly, and it's a monopoly racket. And, of course, the government has the monopoly, so the government wants to maintain it. And these bills are extremely important first steps. So I'm really hopeful that they'll pass all three of these pieces of legislation, because we really need to, you talk about auditing the Fed and all of that kind of stuff in Congress, and I'm skeptical that Congress is ever going to really do anything. Right. But these are actually practical steps that will help break up that monopoly on money and, again, make it easier for people to buy silver and buy gold and then also use it in barter transactions.
Yeah, because when you really get down to it, the more that people use gold and silver as money, the more it'll catch on, the more that other people will learn that it's not dangerous, the world won't come to an end, or they'll stop worrying about, like, what am I going to have to do, carrying around a bunch of gold change in my pocket in order to buy a pack of gum? I mean, these are the types of questions or comments that people send to us anytime we talk about the use of gold and silver. And that leads me to the next bill that we're covering on this, Utah House Bill 224, which I think is a step beyond what Texas has done. They are in the process. They're taking bids as of last fall to establish the gold depository there. But Mike, what I learned from your reporting is that there already is, they call it a repository in Utah. There already is one in Utah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a private repository where people can deposit gold and silver, create an account, and then they can actually use that gold and silver in that account to do business transactions. So if you have vendors that are willing to accept your gold and silver, you can actually use like a debit card type of situation, as I understand it, and actually use the gold and silver that you have and transfer that to the vendor and basically do business without ever having to have a checking account or a bank account or dollar bills. So it allows you to do actual business transaction using gold and silver tender. And what this Utah bill will do is it will basically establish a firmer foundation for these repositories, for the one that exists, and also for the development of new ones. It will also set the stage for the state to deposit funds, actual state funds, in gold repositories. So it'll make gold and silver another option for the state to store their money. So right now they could invest money in bonds, they can invest money in certain other financial instruments. This bill will allow them to actually put state funds in gold and silver in these repositories. So again, we're expanding the use of gold and silver as legal tender. We're creating a better foundation for private individuals to use these repositories. It will make them much more available for the people of Utah. And so basically, it is a step beyond what's going on in Texas. Texas passed a law to create a depository. Basically, what this Utah bill does is it takes this existing repository and creates a foundation for it and legitimizes it, I guess is the best word. Although I hate to use the word legitimize when it comes to the state.
Well, you know, I mean, there's a lot of the general public doesn't want to do anything unless they get approval.
Exactly.
And that's more of a problem, I think, of the spineless general public
Right.
than of using that terminology. So, I mean, I get it. That's Utah House Bill 224 from Representative Ken Ivey. I know they had a hearing on it and decided they're going to work out some technical issues, as you mentioned to me. And the repository, it's run by a company called, is it UPMA or United Precious Metals Association, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. And it seems like a bunch of good folks.
When we post the blog on this, hopefully you can pull up a link and include that as well.
Yeah.
One other issue that I want to cover prominently this week is bills to protect privacy reject the federal surveillance state. Most prominent was New Hampshire House Bill 171, which late last week passed committee by a 10-9 vote. And mind you, the committee chair was a co-sponsor of the bill. And this would turn off, quote, material support or resources to any unconstitutional federal mass surveillance programs. Any federal surveillance programs that is not basically following the Fourth Amendment. So I would guess all of them at this point. And this should be up for a full state house vote in New Hampshire either tomorrow, maybe Thursday. The schedule so far says February 15th, so we'll keep an eye on that and hopefully report on it soon. You got any more insight on that bill there, Mike?
I was very pleased to see that it did get a do pass vote of confidence. Yeah, ought to pass vote of confidence from the committee. That's very important in that New Hampshire process. As we've explained before, I think in New Hampshire, you actually can move a bill forward even if it gets an ought not passed, but it makes it very difficult once it gets into the full House. So I think this increases its chances of passage. I'm sure it's going to be a close vote, but this is a very important bill. And I think that if New Hampshire could pass this into law, it could really get the ball rolling on this much more aggressive kind of over I don't want to say over encompassing, but instead of looking at it,
hey, think about it. There's 300 so-called sanctuary cities that are not participating in federal enforcement of some federal immigration acts. We can apply this to all kinds of stuff. So
exactly.
I don't see why we can't have a privacy sanctuary in New Hampshire. Why is the state of New Hampshire helping the federal government spy on the people who live in New Hampshire and, by extension, everyone in the country? And every state is actually helping the federal government commit these violations of the Fourth Amendment by participating in these programs. They absolutely should stop participating. And like you were saying, this is a great foundation. I'm not sure if it's going to go real far in New Hampshire, but the fact that it got out of committee and a longtime privacy advocate, Representative Neil Kirk, sponsored the bill, I think that's very positive. At least it passed the first step there,
Yep.
10-9, and we'll be watching again a little bit more this week. Another bill that you reported on last week from Representative Daniel Zolnikov. He's got a suite of privacy bills. I wanted to focus primarily on House Bill 148, which passed 99-1 out of the State House last week.
And that was a bill that would require a warrant for the law enforcement agencies to get any of your electronic information from a service provider. So in order to go to Verizon or AT&T and get information from your cell phone, they would actually have to get a warrant first. And this is an extremely important first step in terms of protecting electronic data privacy, get a warrant. And it also has ramifications at the federal level in two different ways. First off, the states get this information and then they share it. And so basically, if a state is getting information, you can pretty much be confident that it's also going into federal databases. So the less information the state's gathering, the better off we are.
Right.
And then second, by prohibiting this type of, the way they phrase it, prohibiting obtaining warrantless data, it means they also can't obtain warrantless data from the NSA. So in other words, the NSA will go and obtain this stuff without getting a warrant and then pass it on to state and local law enforcement. So you have a two-way street going on of information sharing. So by eliminating this transfer of data, this transfer of information, it will keep police there in Montana from being able to get this information from the federal government and then creating what they call parallel constructions or parallel investigations based on warrantless data.
Yeah, that's a really important first step. Again, we're focusing on just getting a good old-fashioned warrant based on probable cause. As you know, this is kind of how things are supposed to be.
Right.
And the fact that they're using loopholes to kind of get around this type of thing over and over, this is a very important first step, foundational step. It actually, what I also think is another benefit of this is that it gets it into the public consciousness that states can take action to protect privacy, even though Washington, D.C. seems totally unwilling. I'm pretty sure they're totally unwilling to do it.
Sure.
So even if things are still going to stay really bad there, we can actually create a little bit of a bulwark, a wall around each of the states to kind of prevent in some way some of the use of the data that they're collecting, even if they can't necessarily shut down the NSA, although that might be a whole nother episode because I think the states can actually shut down the NSA. So, but this is a very good bill, House Bill 148. I think you also were reporting on a bill to do the same with sharing license plate reader information in Montana that moved forward. Do you have? I don't have that bill off the top of my head. Do you know that one?
I don't remember the bill number off the top of my head, but we'll link to it in the show notes for this video. And that's a real solid bill too. It passed out of committee, and basically what it does is it puts very specific restrictions on what law enforcement can do as far as using license plate readers.
Yeah, they're called ALPRs, automated license plate readers. You see them all over the freeway. They can take thousands of photographs per minute. They can actually record who's in the vehicle, use facial recognition, all kinds of really dystopian stuff. And this is the type of bill that's very important to deal with these types of machines out on the highways, because if they can't share the data or they're not collecting the data in the first place, it's not going to end up in federal databases, and they're not going to be tracking where everyone is. The DEA has been very notorious on that, running a program tracking your location for 8+ years. And I know in Maryland, there was actually a very kind of narrow bill filed that saying that, and I guess maybe there's a problem with this. I haven't really thought about it. They're actually tracking who's going in and out of gun shows, or they're trying to ban that. I haven't shared that bill with you yet. I just found it recently, Mike.
Wow.
But so some legislator in Maryland wants to be able to stop this from being used to track people going in and out of gun shows. And I think that's kind of the fear. If they can actually monitor where you're going, they can create a profile based on where you go, where you shop, what type of events you attend, and the like. So that it's probably House Bill 147 is what I'm thinking.
There's two really good provisions in that bill. Number one, it actually prohibits taking pictures of any occupant inside the vehicle.
Oh, that's great.
That was one of the things that was added in the amendment process in the committee. So that was a good addition. And the other things that it does is it requires that police eliminate and destroy any data within 90 days unless they get a preservation order or a warrant. So
I'd love to see it at 7 days.
I would too. but it was 18 months was what it was before it was amended. So the amendment actually improved the scope of the bill a bit there. So the most important thing is that it does prevent creating permanent databases. So.
That's excellent. Okay, that's House Bill probably 147.
I think it is
or maybe
147.
149. The suite of bills is all around those numbers there in Montana. We'll make sure to post the link as well after the show, and we post it over at blog.10thamendmentcenter.com. We're also monitoring a number of bills to stop warrantless spying by cell site simulators or stingrays. In my notes here, we've got bills that we're watching in Maryland, Missouri, South Carolina, I know Connecticut, and a number of other states. I think we'll maybe focus on that a little bit more next week. I guess it depends. All this stuff is in flux. We're watching so many bills.
Right.
To keep up to date, because we're posting anywhere from 3 to 10 blog reports on bills every single day. Mike, I know you're writing a ton of them. Shane Trejo as well. Make sure you go over to blog.10thamendmentcenter.com. And of course, if you support the work we're doing, it's 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. And you can pitch in a couple of bucks a month and make sure that we can keep doing what we're doing. Of course, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week here at 10th or Tuesday.